guard grabbed him by the collar and shoved him toward the exit like he was dragging out a bag of trash. The man stumbled. His coffee hit the marble floor first, the cup cracking, the dark liquid spreading across the white tiles in a shape that looked almost deliberate. He put one hand out to catch himself against the security desk. His palm squeaked against the glass. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to leave," the guard said. He was younger than the man he was removing, broader through the shoulders. His voice had that particular flatness that comes not from calm, but from certainty. The certainty that no one in this building was going to stop him. The man's name was Geoffrey Marsh. He was 51 years old. He was wearing a gray jacket he'd owned for 6 years, a pair of khakis that had seen better days, and shoes that were clean but not new. He had taken the bus to get here. He had been waiting in the lobby of Harwick Medical Center for 11 minutes before the guard approached him. He had not raised his voice. He had not touched anyone. He had been sitting in one of the chairs near the east entrance, the ones with the low arms and the cushions worn flat from years of families pressing into them, holding a paper cup of coffee from the cart outside and reading something on his phone. "There are resources available," the guard said, not looking at him, "at Creston Community Center on 5th. I can give you the address." Geoffrey looked at him for a moment. "I'm not homeless," he said. "Sir, I have a meeting with Dr. Enid Farrow in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at 11:15. The guard paused, not because he believed him, but because a woman at the reception desk had looked up. "You need to have an appointment in the system," the guard said. "I do have an appointment in the system. I'm going to need you to step outside while I verify. You didn't ask anyone else in this lobby to step outside while you verified anything." There were 7 other people in the lobby. 3 of them were watching now. A woman with a child in a stroller had stopped pretending to look at her phone. An older man near the elevator bay had turned his head. Geoffrey Marsh did not raise his voice. That was what people would remember later, that he never raised his voice, even when the guard took him by the arm. "Don't touch me," Geoffrey said, quietly, evenly. The guard's grip tightened, and that was when Geoffrey's jacket sleeve rode up, and the woman at the reception desk, whose name was Beverly, who had worked at Harwick for 19 years, who had seen a lot of things in 19 years, saw something on his wrist. A lanyard tucked back, folded over. A badge. The kind issued to faculty, not visitors. She stood up. She didn't say anything yet. She just stood up. Geoffrey Marsh had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, in a house with a screen door never quite closed all the way. His mother worked nights at a textile plant for 11 years before her back gave out. His father drove a delivery truck and coached Little League on Saturdays. They were not poor, not exactly, but they lived with the particular carefulness of people who knew that things could become poor at any moment, and so nothing was wasted. He had been a quiet child. Teachers described him as self-contained, which was teacher language for a kid who didn't cause trouble, but also didn't fit neatly into any box they had. He read constantly. He finished his work early and then sat with the kind of stillness that made some adults uncomfortable. Not the stillness of boredom, but of someone listening to something no one else could quite hear. By the time he was 16, he had read everything in his school library about the heart. Not metaphorically. The actual muscle. The valves, the chambers, the electrical impulses that caused it to contract and release 60 to 100 times a minute. Every minute for a whole human life, without anyone asking it to. He found this astonishing. He still did. He got a scholarship to Morehouse, then to Emory for medical school, then a residency at Johns Hopkins that had, at the time, felt like a dream constructed from parts of other dreams, something almost too specific to be real. He had been at Harwick Medical Center for 9 years. For the last 3, he had been the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. His name was on a plaque in the hallway outside the department. It had been there for 3 years. He had never once thought about whether that meant people would recognize him. He had not always looked the way he looked now. Or rather, he had always looked this way. But the world had not always responded to it the same way. In his residency years, in his scrubs, with a badge visible and other residents around him, people had known what he was. The context had done the work. But over the years, on the days he didn't have surgery scheduled, he had taken to dressing the way he dressed before medical school. The comfortable clothes, the worn-in shoes, the jacket that had belonged to his father. It was not a statement. It was simply who he was when no one was measuring him. He had noticed over those years that the lobby of Harwick Medical Center treated him differently on those days. Staff he didn't know well looked past him. Once, a pharmaceutical rep had handed him a brochure and pointed him toward the waiting area. Once, a new nurse had asked if he needed help finding the right floor. He had always brushed it off. He was a busy man. There were larger things in the world. But this morning was different. This morning, a guard had grabbed him by the collar. Beverly came around from behind the reception desk. She was a small woman, round-faced, with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She walked with the particular purposefulness of someone who has made up her mind about something. "Kevin," she said. The guard, Kevin, looked at her. "Let him go." Kevin released Geoffrey's arms slowly, the way people do when they want you to know they're choosing to comply, not being forced to. Beverly looked at Geoffrey. Her face was careful, not apologetic, not yet. Still reading the situation. "Can I ask your name, sir?" "Geoffrey Marsh." She went still. It was just a fraction of a second. But Geoffrey noticed it. He had learned over many years of watching people's faces during moments of medical crisis to notice fractions of seconds. "Dr. .3, Marsh," she said. Her voice was very even. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I have a meeting at 11:15, he said. "I'm going to be late." He picked up the cracked coffee cup from the floor. He set it on the edge of the security desk, not aggressively, just neatly, because he had been raised to clean up after himself. Then he walked to the elevator. He did not look back. Dr. Enid Farrow was waiting for him in conference room 4B. She was the new director of surgical education, 2 months into the role, still learning which hallways connected to which. She was also the reason Geoffrey had requested this particular meeting. There was a curriculum restructuring proposal that affected his department, and he had things to say about it. She looked up when he came in, looked at the clock, looked at him. "You're 2 minutes late," she said. "That's not like you." "I had a situation downstairs," Geoffrey said. He sat down. He opened his folder. He did not elaborate. Not then. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. They disagreed on 3 points and reached agreement on 2. Enid was sharp and precise and did not waste words, which Geoffrey appreciated. By the end, they had a working draft of a compromise proposal that both of them could bring back to their respective teams. As she was gathering her notes, she said, without looking up, "What kind of situation?" He told her, briefly, factually, the same way he would present a case. "Here are the events, here is the sequence, here is what happened." Enid Farrow stopped gathering her notes. She sat back in her chair. She looked at him across the conference table with an expression that was not quite surprise, because she was not naive about what the world was, but something more specific, something that had to do with the particular exhaustion of hearing a story you have heard before, in a place where you had hoped not to hear it. "Kevin," she said. "The big guy. Buzzcut. I don't know his name." "I do," she said. "He's had 3 complaints in the last 14 months. Geoffrey looked at her. 3 complaints, she said again, from patients, from a volunteer, from a staff member in outpatient services. She paused. All of which were reviewed and determined to not rise to the level of disciplinary action. By whom? By the department that reviews those things? She picked her pen up and put it back down. Which is not my department, and which, until this morning, was not something I had any particular reason to put on my priority list. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside in the hallway, a cart went by, wheels squeaking against the floor. "I want to be honest with you," Enid said. "If you were not who you are, if you did not have the title you have and the name you have, I don't know that anyone would have stopped him. I don't know that Beverly would have come around from behind that desk. I think you might have been walked to the exit, and that would have been the end of it." Geoffrey looked at the table. There was a scratch on the surface near the corner. Someone had dragged something across it once, a long time ago, and it had never been refinished. "I know," he said. "That's the part that should concern all of us," she said. "Not just that it happened to you, that it happens, that it has been happening. that 3 complaints existed and nothing changed until the person it happened to had a plaque with his name on it down the hall. Geoffrey did not make a formal complaint that day. He did not call a meeting. He did not send an email. What he did was sit in his office for 20 minutes after his meeting with Enid, with the door closed, looking out the window at the parking structure across the street. He thought about his mother, who had worked nights for 11 years and who had learned to carry herself in a particular way in certain spaces. Not smaller exactly, but careful. Practiced. The way you carry yourself when you know that the wrong movement might cost you something you can't afford to lose. He thought about the men and women who came through his department as patients, who came in frightened, often, and who had to trust people they didn't know with the most critical machinery in their bodies. He thought about what it meant to walk into a space and be immediately read as a problem to be managed, rather than a person to be helped. He thought about what that cost. Not just in dignity, but in the body itself, the cortisol, the blood pressure, the accumulated weight of 1,000 small moments like this one, pressing down on a heart that was already doing everything it could just to keep going. Then he picked up his phone and called his friend Claudette, who ran the hospital's patient advocacy office, and asked if she had 20 minutes. She had 20 minutes. What happened next took 3 weeks, not 3 minutes. That is how these things actually work, not in a single dramatic confrontation, but in a series of meetings, emails, spreadsheets, uncomfortable conversations in conference rooms. Enid Farrow put Kevin's complaint file on her desk and read through it. Then she put it on the desk of the chief of operations, whose name was Robert Hedges, and who had the particular discomfort of a man being asked to account for something he had been not thinking about for 14 months. Claudette pulled the records on who had been approached, questioned, or asked to leave the lobby in the preceding 2 years. She built a spreadsheet. The patterns in that spreadsheet were not subtle. Geoffrey presented the spreadsheet, along with the complaint history, along with a formal written account of what had happened to him, to the hospital's senior leadership in a meeting that lasted 2.5 hours. He was calm. He was factual. He had brought documentation. Kevin was placed on administrative leave, pending a full review. The review concluded 3 weeks later. He did not return to Harwick Medical Center. New lobby procedures were implemented. New training. A different review process for complaints. One with a shorter timeline and a higher bar for what counted as not rising to the level of disciplinary action. None of this made the news. There was no press release. The hospital issued an internal statement that used phrases like commitment to creating a welcoming environment and ongoing efforts to ensure all individuals are treated with dignity. Geoffrey read the statement. He thought about all the people who had passed through that lobby in the past 14 months. The patients who had come in scared. The family members who had been waiting for news. The volunteers and staff and visitors who had been read the wrong way by a guard who had been reported 3 times and kept his job. He thought about whether any of those people had a plaque on a wall somewhere. Whether it would have mattered if they did. There is a question that follows Geoffrey Marsh's story the way a shadow follows a person in afternoon light. It is not a comfortable question, and it does not have a comfortable answer. The system worked for him. Eventually, after he identified himself, after Beverly recognized his name, after Enid had a reason to care, after the spreadsheet made the patterns undeniable, the system worked. Kevin is gone. The procedures are different. Something changed. But Geoffrey is the first to say, and he has said it in the meetings that followed, in the conversations with Claudette, in the quiet of his own office, that the thing that made the system move was not that it was wrong. It had been wrong for 14 months. The thing that made the system move was that it had been wrong to the wrong person, and he does not know what to do with that. He has turned it over many times. He has carried it the way you carry something that has no good place to be set down. His mother used to say that doing right shouldn't require a reason, that treating people like people shouldn't need a credential attached. She said it simply, the way she said most things, standing at the kitchen counter in Decatur with the screen door not quite closed behind her. She was right. She was exactly right. Geoffrey knows she was right. He also knows that he walked out of that lobby under his own power because his name was on a plaque down the hall, and that on the day someone without that plaque got grabbed by the collar and walked to the exit, the lobby was exactly as quiet as it always was. That is what he cannot stop thinking about, not what happened to him. What happens when it happens to someone who doesn't have a plaque? What happened for 14 months in a lobby where 3 complaints were reviewed and filed and forgotten? He still takes the bus. He still wears the gray jacket, the worn-in shoes. He still gets coffee from the cart outside and reads something on his phone while he waits. He does this on purpose now. He wants to see what the lobby does with a man it doesn't recognize yet. I keep thinking about the coffee cup. Not the guard, not the lobby, not even the look on Beverly's face when she heard his name. I keep thinking about Geoffrey setting that cracked cup on the edge of the security desk, quietly, neatly, before he walked to the elevator. That one small act tells you everything about who he is. A man who had just been grabbed by the collar in his own workplace, and his first instinct was to clean up after himself. That's not weakness. That's something that takes a long time to build. There's a version of the story where Geoffrey loses it, where he raises his voice, demands to speak to a manager, makes a scene, and honestly, no one could blame him. But I think about what it cost him, not just that morning, but over years, to be the kind of person who could walk through that lobby with his head up and his voice even. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from knowing who you are, well past the point where the world around you is telling you something different. What strikes me most about Geoffrey isn't that he's a brilliant surgeon. It's that he never stopped being the kid from Decatur who read everything in the school library because he found the human heart astonishing. Fame didn't change that. Status didn't change that. And a guard grabbing him by the collar didn't change that either. That's a kind of moral backbone that most of us spend our whole lives trying to develop. The kind where your sense of yourself doesn't live or die by whether the room recognizes you. And then there's what he did after. He didn't just fix his own situation and move on. He called Claudette. He sat with the data. He built the case not around himself, but around the 14 months of people nobody recognized, the patients who came in scared, the families waiting for news, the volunteers who got the same treatment and had no plaque on any wall. That took a different kind of intelligence than what's tested in medical school. It took the ability to look past your own story and ask the harder question. What about everyone else? I think about the systems in my own life that have worked for me because of who I am, not because of what was right. It's uncomfortable to sit with that, but I think that discomfort is the beginning of something useful, if you're willing to stay in it instead of looking away. Geoffrey stayed in it. He took the bus back the next day in the same jacket. He still does. That's not a small thing. Most people, once the immediate crisis passes, let themselves off the hook. They tell themselves the outcome was good, things are different now, time to move on. Geoffrey chose not to let himself off the hook. He chose to keep showing up in a way that asked the question again, every single morning. I don't know what the lobby does with him now. I don't know if anything has truly changed, or if the change is mostly paperwork. But I know that the kind of person Geoffrey Marsh is, someone who built himself carefully and quietly over a lifetime, who holds himself together when the world is trying to take him apart, who refuses to let what happened to him become just a footnote. That kind of person is the reason any system changes at all. The coffee cup was cracked. He set it down anyway. Then he went upstairs and did the work. That's all any of us can do.